Storytime like that.
Hi, good evening. Welcome once again to the Gildarie Freddie Show right here at the Guyanese Critic platform, Facebook. We also coming to you live on YouTube. Interesting evening it is, and an interesting day. Parliament Freddie, this is something we got to talk about. Today I saw something that I didn't too agree with. We're talking about this country that is supposed to have an opposition, that is supposed to be representing the people, representing 218,000. And on a day like today, we have with us in the office, in our studio here, Minister of Education, Priya Manickchand. But before I introduce you to her, Freddie, it is unbelievable, and at this day and age, when we're talking about accountability, transparency, and when you were signed up to represent the people in office, that the government would have been able to pass through without questions being asked from the opposition. At least the government would have asked themselves some questions. But it is unbelievable that the opposition was not there. I don't care what kind of excuses or whatever you're saying. At the end of the day, you have to be there to ask the question. You can't ask it outside of Parliament. But, ladies and gentlemen, today we happen to have with us here Minister of Education, Priya Manickchand. And of course, before we go to her, I want to say welcome once again to my co-host, Freddie Kissoon. Somebody said today that the Priya Manickchand had a very lovely hairstyle on the picture that we use, and they're also saying that so does Freddie Kissoon. I'm not sure whether he combed his hair today. That's not up for debate. So, Freddie, over to you, and then straight into we have some questions in the hot seat for Minister Manickchand.
I got something that's going to surprise you. When Timothy Jonas was here, he said I taught him at UG. And then when Chawandas was here, he said I taught him at UG. And you said, you teach everybody at UG. You want to make a guess now if I taught her? You want to guess?
How much more bad are you teaching here? So you teach Peter?
Well, I did teach her. Well, listen, Minister Manickchand, welcome to your old professor. And welcome to this program. There's a lot we have to talk about. This is the format I have in mind. I don't know if Gildarie would agree. I will let Gildarie deal with questions in relation to ministerial portfolio. You are a politician, you are a woman advocate, and you're also an Indian woman. Those three dimensions are important post 2020. So I want to deal with some situations involving you, how you see Guyana post 2020 as a politician, how you see what was going on in 2020 March. I also want to get your thoughts on how women groups are reacting to power post 2020, and also the question of rising ethnic thing in this country, and how those tensions relate to the Indian population. So, although I will ask questions in relation to your portfolio, I want to get into those three dimensions before the hour is up. So, with those remarks, I'll go back to Gildarie.
You know why you tell the girl or why you tell the minister, so you're going to ask her. You don't normally do that. Are you stuttering?
My former student.
Okay. It so happens also that her brother, Anil, used to be in the same year group with me at QC, and I think I could remember vaguely you were there a couple of years.
So I was 2 years younger than him.
Yeah, so he was there in the 1990, but Anil, I know he's doing a businessman now. Minister.
And we all did politics with Mr. Kissoon.
You remember the philosophers, right?
Everybody taught him.
Paul 101, yeah.
You apply those philosophers up to now?
I think of some of them. Yeah.
You don't have to answer it because you're sitting in the hot seat, but I could ask you, was he a good lecturer? You don't have to answer that.
He was interesting. He was entertaining. So you could be a boring lecturer. And I don't think you have to agree with everything a lecturer says or a professor says. In fact, you could think this is a crazy person, but he was a very interesting lecturer.
Interesting is a word, and you got to understand in diplomacy.
Interesting as in caught your attention.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember one time he just came and said, "Oh, forget about politics and politics 101. Who wants to say a poem?" And things like that.
Minister, straight into it. You have $6 billion given out in Because We Care cash grant. How big is the nightmare of that in terms of accountability?
Funny you asked that. You'd think it was a big nightmare, right? And it should be a big nightmare. And it would have been, it can be. Anything that deals with money, especially when you're dealing with cash, ought to worry anybody who is spearheading that. To allay our own fears and worry and the populations, we put a lot of work into the back end of it, and that's why it rolled out so smoothly. So for the first time, Guyana served, as of today, 184,000 students in 3 days. In 3 days, with the Auditor General's office present at almost every single location, including in the hinterland. And we did this last year, but we did it in a longer period. And we actually had a report. We have a report from the AG's office about how the process went. And there were some recommendations made. We incorporated into this year. And I'm very, very happy to say that I'm not at all nervous about, we could tell you exactly how many envelopes were lost. So, we received 192,000 envelopes, 279. We issued 182, 144. We returned 10,132, and we lost two envelopes in the whole country. And all this was live audited in front of professionals who are employed by the AG's office that were sent there, not as our friends, but to do their job. And we had a lot of support from the Guyana Police Force. So it could have been a nightmare. We spent a lot of man hours making sure that it didn't become the nightmare that it could have been. When I say we, I want to be very clear. I spearheaded, but it was the ministry staff, people you don't see in the newspapers, you don't see in headlines, you don't see, pomposetting around, including staff on the ground in various regions that worked to get this done.
How easy would it have been? You see, because why we're asking that? Because we know that the government, because of practical purposes and so on, you can't put money into a bank account because not everybody, and that would have been more probably a logistical nightmare here. I'm looking at it, thinking about it. From all practical purposes, is this the best solution that we would have had? Actually giving it out like that.
In terms of cash or banks, well, the reality is 3/4 the people who were recipients didn't have bank accounts. Nobody in regions 1, 7, 8, and 9, up Maikoni River, up the Mahika River, up the Essequibo River, they don't have bank accounts and they don't have banks. Or if they have bank accounts, they can't access it quickly. So while we have to move to a better place where we could do this kind of program a little bit more efficiently or a little bit more safely, because it's not that safe to be handling that amount of cash, this was the best way to make people benefit directly. So we were very clear. We want to be accountable. We want to follow all these rules, but people must not suffer in that process. People must not find it hard. The end user, citizen, beneficiary must not be the victim of us trying to make sure it was accountable, the process was accountable, and so on. So, we can look at how we could do this differently, especially given that we are doing cash grants not only through education but other places. But the reality is, on the ground, our recipients are not, they have to access this.
Freddie, yeah.
Clarify something for Timothy Jonas. He's the chairman of an opposition party, and he was our guest, and he directly spoke about your project. And he said he doesn't see how there's accountability when you put these envelopes in the hands of these people to deliver it. That's what he's saying. What happens afterwards? How can you account for who got this and who didn't get that?
So, two things about the new and united Guyana. One, there was information out there that we published deliberately so that people, everybody could know the process, the accountability process, the eligibility criteria, and so on. And ANOG seemed particularly ignorant of those. And if you make yourself, if you divorce yourself from information that is publicly available, published for all the world to see, then you can have cynical views like Timothy has. I had this conversation on the ANOG page. I actually went on to their page when they were raising a very cynical, is it really going to reach the people? So here's how this happened. We got we arrived at people's names from the register in the class. So the class teacher had to give us their register. That was then checked by the supervisor of her level. So if you're talking about grade 1 or Form 4, the Form 4 supervisor had to check that. Then the deputy head, then the head. Then it came to the region and then to the education department. We then took that list, put it on top paper, a sheet of paper in alphabetical order with the child's name, date of birth, address, parent's name, and 2 places for the parent to sign and for the ID card that they're going to use to identify themselves. When someone comes in, we have that sheet in front of us, and it is your child's name is Mary Jones. We go down to J, we find that they had to answer these questions. Parent signs, ID card is there. If there is an accusation of theft, it would be aimed at the teachers in the system because they were the ones who were administering this. Could someone have gotten smart and slipped out an envelope? Yes, but we could tell you today, 5 days later, the 2 envelopes are missing because when we went in there, when they were packing at the bank, they packed according to that list in a folder. All of this observed by the Auditor General. When that package was opened, it was opened in front of the public. Envelopes were counted. They said, fine, we received 100. When they were sharing out, at the end of that, a reconciliation was done that same night. They said, well, we got 100, we shared out 92, there are 8 left. Here are the 8. And all of that was observed by the Auditor General. ANOG is calling for something else. Well, so that is the process. Now, could a teacher have slipped it? I told you we lost two envelopes containing $30,000 each. In one case, we didn't, it seemed to maybe have been stuck onto, when they were packing, onto the other envelope. And we have a couple of complaints because this is how easy it is to pick it up. In one case, staff of a school that was involved in the distribution process signed for the parent. But the parent, when the parent turns up, their name was not, the availability of that grant was not there for them because someone signed next to their name. Immediately the police was called in and there's a police investigation going on with that right now. So it's not that hard. Look, it's very easy, it's very sexy to say everything is corrupt, especially when you're an opposition party trying to knock on the door of government and you turn your nose up in the air and think that everybody else is beneath you. These are hardworking people. I didn't touch a cent of this. I wasn't involved in the process. So you're making an accusation like that so that you could attack the PPP. It wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed, if you know the system, Timothy Jonas and the ANUG aimed that accusation at the hardworking teachers of this country. Sadly, APNU's membership, albeit small, they all know that system because they used the system. And I'm glad they used the system, and I believe even Tim would have used the system. So you kind of know what's happening. It's very easy to sit here, Freddie, and say, oh, everything is corrupt, somebody can thief, now all those things, and they sound nice. And because we come from a history where accountability was not always the focus of public officers, it's easy to get traction, and that's why we took a lot of time and spent a lot of effort. And that's why I spent time answering on their page, because it's not fair to me or to the other people who put systems in place to make sure that that was not one of the accusations we could legitimately and fairly attract. We really spent time. It wasn't only about giving the grant. For me, we had an opportunity here to show this country that we could do this without being corrupt. I thought that was an important and glorious opportunity, and it was as important to me as sharing the grant.
Minister,
we invited them to come with us. We said, come along to any one of the locations, see how this works, so you could see and what are their weaknesses. Of course, once you're dealing with cash, somebody could pick up the whole thing and run off with it. That is possible, but it didn't happen.
Did anybody turn up? Any opposition members that you invited?
No. I specifically invited the ANUG, ANOG.
Okay.
Because this was a conversation they had on their Facebook page, which I joined.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not comfortable. Look, we do plenty things wrong. We don't get a lot of things right. Because when you're dealing with 200,000 students and 10,000 teachers or 400,000 parents, something goes wrong every single day. You want to find one of those and talk about it, go right ahead. Let's fix it together. But you cannot, and I'm not going to let someone who just gets the opportunity to come here because you invited him, to sit here because he has a camera in front of him and cast aspersions on so many people. It's not right.
Very good. Minister.
And no, they didn't come.
And they didn't
They
come.
didn't come. I'm sure they received a grant, which they're entitled to, so that's not a problem. And I'm happy that whenever they were receiving, wherever they were receiving, they must have seen how straightforward the system was. They must have seen an auditor watching them as that happened.
And this speaks a bigger question, Minister. At least I would like to know, and I think the people out there, 2 years down the line into the Finale presidency, could you say there has been some people who are a little iffy about giving cash grants, and whether it might you put that as against let us invest maybe more in infrastructure. Could you tell me how we went about determining that cash grants are probably some of the best ways, especially in a post-pandemic and where inflation is at the highest?
So you kind of answer your own question there. You have parents in school with their children in school. They have to prepare them for school in September. Rising costs that are directly related to the war and instability in other parts of the world that apparently don't touch us, but they do in terms of costs of different things, fuel, wheat, and so on, as well as the shortages that came when we had the COVID closures across the world in factories and so on, have contributed significantly to rising costs. We have always given grants. So the PPP used to give, before this period, a uniform grant. We gave food to the hinterland students. We've always been giving it, not this big. Now that we're in office and we promised to do this because it's a big relief to parents. I mean, you have 3 children, you just went home with $90,000. And while it's not the crown's jewel, it is definitely, I'm a parent, $30,000 is enough to outfit a child for school. It won't last all year, but it's enough to outfit a child for school. And so the effort really here is to bring relief to parents and to do it universally. So I just want to point that out. There's a lot of talk. I see you had, is it here? Was it somewhere else? I was watching David Hines, and I don't think these guys understand how they break the hearts of people like me who grew up thinking these were figures of the state and they had these profound views and we should listen to them, and and then they've just come and they're such terrible disappointments. And I don't say that lightly, like heartbreaking. How could you be someone, I question myself, that I looked up to, that I, thought would have had some value to this country, to the world. And he goes on about everything is ethnically, we discriminate against persons. The 180-something thousand parents who picked this up could attest to you, they are walking witnesses. And nobody asked them how you vote, take off your cap, let me see you here, how you pray, how do you identify sexually? We didn't ask anybody any of that. Your children going to school, they're on the register. We've brought this here for you. We're happy to serve you. And so you're not hearing that. That is everyone universally, and every parent in this country could say nobody checked with them to see. The parents of the children in Linden got this the same day the parents of the children at Babu John. That's how we work. Same day the parents of the children at Rupanau got it. All three, all in 3 days, the entire country was served.
When the guest is advertised days before, we do get emails of people suggesting that we ask the guests things that are on their mind. When I was leaving to come here, I got a telephone call from a teacher. His name is Ashan Pakas. He teaches at Messiah Primary School, number 71. He said he'd like to hear your views on the 8,000 annually for teachers for the uniform. It will be given after the classes began. And he's suggesting that the teachers would need it before school resumes.
Right. So when the then President Jack Dale had negotiations with the Guyana Teachers Union, it was about, obviously, a better salary. And the union wanted a better salary, which is, I believe, their duty to ask for. And I think at the time, the conversation was, I wasn't Minister of Education at the time, but I remember along those lines, look, we might not be able to give you a much bigger salary alone, or we might not be able to give you what you want, but we're going to give you a better salary, a fixed increase where you're certain that you're getting this every year, as well as a uniform allowance, duty free for teachers, a housing revolving fund, and other benefits like that. The uniform allowance is $8,000, and it should be given. It should be given before teachers start back holiday, and that's something we have to work on with the Ministry of Finance. These things are not released to education. There are different periods, and there might have been a historic reason why it wasn't. I'm not certain what the reason is, but I don't believe it is not something we could. It is definitely something we can look at. I'm not even certain if every region does the same thing. So that's the other story. Education is decentralized. So this will be in the regional budget at the different regions. One region may very well say, well, we're giving the teachers in June, and another region gives them in November. And there's no rhyme or reason for something like that. So we're trying to pull together, and I hope my staff is listening, so that's one of the things we can look at almost immediately to see how we could meet that need.
Thank you very much, Minister. I saw something that I felt very happy about the other day, that you've actually started a move to have what you call a literacy department. Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit that? Because I happen to know where literacy is concerned, that I think we've fallen short, but tell us a little bit that and how you intend to roll that out.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. I saw about at least 3 news outfits carried a completely wrong story, so much so that I questioned whether I said this. And I had to go back and look at the video to see, did I really say that? What I said is we have begun a department, not that we are going to. Mm-hmm. So we actually have an appointed Assistant Chief Education Officer. Her name is Samantha Williams. She's an expert in literacy. And the whole point of that is because, look, we've done very well so far, but you see these really, really terrible, heartbreaking stories of failure and failure of the state, frankly. When we mark the grade 6 papers, that children can't write in grade 6. They can't reproduce whatever it is they're thinking. They probably couldn't read that question. And it's really, it's unacceptable. We can't go on like that. So we have to do more than we have been doing. And we have to make sure that schools and teachers are held accountable. Because when you reach grade 6, you were in nursery 1, nursery 2, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6. 8 teachers. 8 teachers' hands you pass through, and you can't read and you can't write. And you don't understand what you're reading. But we need you in this oil economy, in this booming Guyana that we'll have, to be self-sufficient. And we need all the skills we could have. And so the education sector is perhaps the most important in this new Guyana we're trying to build. What is the citizen we're putting out? What is the kind of citizen? Is this person going to be functional in their life? Will they be able to just carry on, generally read signs on the minibus, read signs in the supermarket, and so on? Better yet, is this person going to be someone we could employ in these 5 hotels we're about to build? Is this person going to be someone we're just passing a hemp bill right now as I speak in the National Assembly. Will this person be able to market the hemp that they might be able to grow? That is a serious burden on the education system. And like I said, we're really good at self-flagellation, but we cannot fail to understand that it has to be 100%. It can't be, we've reached 90. The 10% of children that we fail would be 10% too many.
I want to point you to 2 statements you made that speaks about politics. So you have politics in your mind. In one of your answers, you said they want to criticize the PPP. You didn't say government. And then you say people like David Hines, you look up to. Those are people you used to.
Can't do that anymore.
Right. So we're talking about politics here. The disappointment to you of many more people like David Hines. And the people who want to criticize the PPP. So let's talk about politics now. March 2020 has turned this country around in directions that, like you, I could never have anticipated. If David Hines is a huge disappointment to you, he has been a gargantuan disappointment to me. So were people that I respected and admired and embraced and internalized their thoughts. Rupert Rupnarine, Bonita Bone, the WP people, Clive Thomas, and
Camraj.
Well, I think
fun.
I think Camraj. That's funny you should be saying that, because I was in a discussion today. My God, look how funny. I was in a discussion today, and we're trying to compare the badness of people. And I put Camraj Ramcharan on top, and I said, I think evil applies to him. I am saying this wearing my academic hat on. I think evil applies to Camraj Ramcharan. What that man has done is simply evil from 2015 to 2020. But what I want to talk to you about is, I did the research for this program. I went and I did the research. Minister Manickchand, I have found not one letter. I went through the mainstream media, I went in the online media. I have found not one letter, not one expression publicly from a women rights group condemning what happened from March 2020 to July 2020. Shortly after the president was sworn in, there was a letter signed objecting to Secretary of State Pompeo coming here. And all the women groups, without exception, signed that letter. Isn't it a sign that just more people have disappointed us?
So you're speaking, you can't imagine how disappointed I am. Not disappointed in a way that it shook everything I thought I knew. I worked with Camraj for a year and a half after I returned, and I held him in such high esteem. He was a really good lawyer with great principles that taught me that regardless of money, you stand up for people if they're being treated badly and if there's any injustice. I looked at people like Karen D'Souza and those girls who led and were successful to an extent to taking us to a place of more awareness. Up to the day the Roysdale Ford appeared outside of the aquatic center. And this was very late in the day. This was after, I know lawyers go to court, they have their arguments and so on, but I did not believe, and if you had asked me then, I would not have believed it. The moment before he appeared, where he sat in front of the television with, I think, Duncan and Jones, saying what he says now, that there's a rig, and repeating that, and I would not have said that he would ever do that. Like I know he was acting and he was representing people in court, but to actually sit on TV and try to thief an election would not have been something I would have attributed to him. A couple of other people who went on TV that I was stunned. I was like, wow, I thought you were absent because while you're in the party, and I understand the collective thing that political parties, expect of their membership, and you mightn't be able to say something publicly against, but I didn't expect some people to be there actually advocating this. Nigel Hughes, I served with Nigel on the Guyana Bar Association. These are people you looked up to, young lawyers come back, and these are the middle bar doing really well, speaking really well. I cannot explain. That was like a personal hurt. How could you This person who would have us all working late, doing, making sure we go to the courts to apply so that people can't be killed and the execution is stalled. You're a human rights lawyer. You're trying to take people's human rights from them. So it's indescribable what happened to young people in their heads when they saw this unfolding before them from people and by people who they grew up learning or hearing names associated with rights and freedoms and so on. And it really makes you wonder about everything you thought you knew about some of.
You're a politician, you're an educated woman. And in the program, I asked you if you remember Plato and Aristotle. There has to be a reason why that gamut, that plethora of groups of people, organizations that we respected, went in that depraved, degenerate, incredibly low direction after March 2020. I am putting it to you, and I'd like to hear your academic explanation. I am putting it to you that for me, 2020 was the crystallization of where people stand along ethnic lines in this country, and the rejection of the rigging by people we thought better is because I'm giving you my view now, and I think it's an academic view, not only a personal view. I think there was a rejection that, look, Indian people are going to be in the government again. And no. And that led them to those pathways. I think I am contending that the people that disappointed us embrace ethnic ideology. I know you're a minister, and it's going to be tight.
No, I don't want to. My position since then is you're not someone who has the moral authority to speak on any issue. I don't have any duty to hear you, listen to you, consult with you. You are not from the civilized grouping of society. So that's my view. I haven't delved as deeply as you have into why this happened. I'm still getting over the shock that some of the people I looked up to did this, or encouraged it through their silence. But I have heard that view that the only explanation here is some cleaving that might not be modern or holistic.
And Minister, this is a further question before I move on to what I really want to ask you. Do you believe that those absence of those groups has really hurt the chances of those groups to become a good voices, strong voices for the people of Guyana? Because I look at it, I made mention not too long ago of the absence of the opposition today. In Parliament, when the government has asked Parliament for some money and they're not there to represent, absences of those social groups or whatever you want to call them, hasn't that led to a disappearance of the voices that we should really be hearing?
Look, I think some groups are dead. They can't come back. And I think some groups, well, I'll tell you about them just now. But the groups like Red Thread and so, they can't speak anymore. I don't see how they can. They were silent for the majority of that 5 years where there were so
5
many
months.
things. No, I'm talking about the 5 years.
20. Yeah.
The 5 years where so many things happened. And I had written a couple of letters. And so she remains in my eyes someone that I can keep on a pedestal. And that I think stayed true to her own views. Very early on, she had written about the Granger administration was appointing old African men to boards. There was an absence of women, there was an absence of any other ethnicity, and it was noticeable and offensive and so on. But she got sick after a while. But there was a silence and a burrowing into some corner or hole somewhere that was never existent when the PPP was in. The moment something happened, these groups would be up and around.
7,000 sugar workers summarily
No
dismissed.
words, nothing. When Elizabeth Harper was appointed prime ministerial candidate nominated, none of the women groups got up and said, wow, this is a big thing. Regardless of how you were voting, this is a big deal. If this woman were to be elected and this party were to win, this would mean a lot for women's rights and visibility and all. None of them said anything. And so it was, even then you started seeing it wasn't a position that you always said you held. This was more a political view. If you don't like this party, then there's nothing they can do that's right. So some of those groups are dead to me, and I think to most other people. But then you have the AFC. Not only are they dead, I think they killed the beauty that could come with a third party, and they killed the hope of any third party that coming up. They're going to be, people will not trust that kind of grouping. So I'm sorry for the Anags and them. They have a lot of work to do because the AFC came in as this savior and this middle person that would hold the balance, and they're neither of these two bad apples, which is what they call the two main parties, and they would be better. And it was all really about power. The moment they got power, they just behaved like the really bad apple.
Minister, the school, back to the school system, I'm hearing increasingly complaints about the challenges that teachers are facing with regards to either violence in school. We've seen kind of behavior. So 20 years back, a kid would probably hold hands with a student, a female, different parties in school. But now you've seen it escalate in different ways, sexual activities and so on. How bad is it?
So is that really true though? I mean, was it only holding hands, or everybody didn't have a cell phone, and we didn't have social media? So Gildarie couldn't wake up in the morning and see that these girls were pregnant. Now you can, because it's in the news. Somebody filmed somebody sitting on somebody's lap and so on. I'm not saying any of that is good. I'm just saying that I'd be cautious with saying it has increased, and I would be a little bit more comfortable saying we have more reports of, because they're more reporting capacity. Everybody now has a phone and camera and so on. Having said that, I think it's unfolding, and I think more of that will unfold. The 2 years that students were in lockdown, depending on which age you're at, but those kids like from 10 to 12, where you most need supervision either from the home or from the school, you're kind of seeing behavior that is oddly antisocial. They don't even know how to relate to their peers. They're clumsy with that, and some of the other things that come with adolescence, they just do not know how to address. And that's already a hard period even without COVID. But I'm seeing effects of that 2-year lockdown in different ways. But I'm not sure that nothing ever happened. I mean, I think back when you were in school, you didn't know any couple.
Yep.
That's not to say anybody should engage in coupledoms, but I'm saying it always happened because you have, in any given year, 50-something thousand high school children just coming into themselves, going through adolescence and puberty, and a lot of this is still taboo in homes and churches and communities and schools. We're not talking to them properly about it. And so you will have enough in that large group of persons to make a wave every now and then.
And with regards to the hinterland, Minister, the hinterland students versus the coastland student, how much, I know there was a gap, or there was the feeling that there's a big gap between the two of them. How much success are we making, or headways are we making in terms of getting it better for the hinterland?
So there's still a big gap, and it's not a conversation that can be lightly had, and it's not something that we could ignore. The hinterland has had particular problems ranging from not having access to trained teachers to not having physical classrooms to sit in. We believe strongly that if we were to change that, we would see even better results than the coast. The hinterland students can compete with everybody out here. Physically where they are, geographically, and the kind of resources, they have no internet. We're now putting televisions in all the Amerindian communities. We are training teachers now online. So where we used to have only 500 teachers coming out every year, we're now able to admit into the college 4,000 teachers. So a lot of hinterland people who used to just do the TTC, which is a trained teacher certificate, because that's all that was available to them, are now doing the associate degree. They actually are qualified to do a degree, but they couldn't before because it wasn't accessible. So those are changes that will come. It won't come overnight. So what we're trying to do for some overnight stopgaps is to provide housing and better incentives so that teachers who are out here can go in, and while the teachers in the hinterland train. But you are right. There's great disparity in almost every output, results, capacity in various programs, and ability to do different things.
He said back to school. I'm going to say back to politics. You have stimulated me, and when this program is over, if you look at it, you'll see you're sounding good when you put on your political hat. So please keep the political hat on. When the no confidence motion was on, there was the epitome of a philosophical absurdity that no scientist would ever tolerate in any discussion. That in a majority of 65 parliamentarians, 34 has to be a majority, not 33. The no confidence motion dragged out for a year. The attempt to rig the election dragged out for 5 months. In that time, there was a column in the Starbuck News called In the Diaspora, edited by Dr. Alisa Trotz. There was not one column devoted to the shenanigans that accompanied the no confidence motion, the philosophical absurdity of what constitutes a majority, and the 5 months of rigging. Then there is a foundation called Moray House, run by Mr. David Decary's daughter, Isabella Decary's. Moray House has a monthly symposium for the entire year of the no confidence motion, the entire 5 months of the election rigging. Moray House didn't put on a symposium. Now, I read Mrs. Isabella Decary's really lashing out to the president for the clothes he wear or what have you. Isn't this the trend of the anti-PPPism that we're going to see until 2025?
So we have to be very, and I wish we were a more mature society, especially coming out of the no confidence and then the 5 months, that we could actually have different views, but do have a relative state of objectivity and maturity in our conversations. Unfortunately, that's not what I'm seeing. There is the People's Progressive Party, Civic, and people who have always opposed that party and will for any reason, on every occasion. And so there were some people even who in the 5 months probably found it grated way too much on their conscience, and so they might have spoken up, but they've gone back into attack mode. And so you get commentary about who didn't dress right, who didn't speak right. I saw people speaking the Queen's English almost with an accent, with a suit and a tie and a kerchief in their pocket, telling us that 33 is not the majority of 65. That would impress
some of
the persons too.
I know.
That would impress some of the persons you're talking about, but that was wrong then. It would have robbed a lot of people of their rights, of just this very, very basic right we should have. We should all have the ability to pick your leaders, the ability to shy them out if you don't like them anymore. And the people who hold themselves out to be middle class and upper middle class sometimes are really pretentious and can really run a farce on people who are reading. For me, there's what did you do in the 5 months? Where were you? And that doesn't mean people who did absolutely nothing shouldn't have a say, because I believe there's space for everybody and there's value in everything. But I would look at people a second time. If you couldn't say for that whole 5 months, you couldn't say something like Dominic Gaskin said. I mean, this was Granger's son-in-law saying, I'm not comfortable. You're saying these SOPs are showing you this, but you're not showing me it. And what I am seeing from the other people who are showing me SOPs says, what you're saying is wrong. I'd like to see yours. And I don't believe yours. That was decent. That was a decent human being.
I can't break the confidence, obviously, my journalistic background. But two persons with serious connections to the PPP leadership told me that their maneuvers when the AFC leave the PNC in December, they are maneuvers to have a relation with the PPP. I know you can't speak for the entire PPP leadership, but how would you treat that? What would be your attitudinal shape to that?
Well, I cannot speak for the PPP, and I don't know the veracity or sources. The AFC needs to. I think the AFC needs to atone publicly. People need to hear from them that they're sorry, that they know the AFC is made up of not only the names you know, Kemraj and Moses, and where is he, by the way, and so on, but it's made up of Jarita Finance and Shara Duncan and some of the most sexist, racist, homophobic people I've ever seen. And they have to speak to those issues publicly, and they have to speak to the continuing conversation that is had every day and every night by those members that continue to hurt people. You cannot there is nothing outside of life. I can't imagine something more sacred than taking away from me my right to vote. And it's funny when you're growing up and you're hearing about Barnum rigging elections, and so you thought, oh, I wish I were there in that period. I would have done this, I would have done that. Feelings like a little rebel or whatever in teenage years. And then when this was upon you, and you realize how quickly this whole country could just collapse. You see, it's far bigger than just taking my vote. If you take my vote, and you know the next time you'll take my vote again, then you don't need to make me happy. You don't need to serve me. You don't need to
we're talking about Barnumism again.
We're talking about Barnumism all over again. So you could do whatever you want, because
and
next 5 years...
he did whatever he wanted. He wasn't electable, and he had no so he did whatever he wanted.
Right. And that's what would have happened.
That was on the horizon.
Yes. And that is... I still can't imagine the fullness of that. That is unimaginable. I can't imagine that you will do nothing to please the population, to win over electorate, because you'll just leave this election. Every 5 years you'll do that. And then we'll be stuck with the likes of the people who are in parliament now. So I'm not surprised. Look, the population is getting to see the PPP and the people they have put in parliament, and they're getting to see the APNU and AFC, and it's almost advantage. There's no contest. I mean, they've put people there who are, their conversation and the height of the conversation is who, where, what, who, here, look how. It's frighteningly low. The caliber is just so low, and I'm not seeing them attracting to their party a better caliber, because of this is the exhibition of what they are right now.
I want to use the word caliber, Minister. 2 years was celebrated or observed by the PPP finale being sworn in as a president. I want to ask you, I saw him with the short pants about 2 or 3 days back, getting up in the middle of the morning, midnight, to go down to check up on his roads. And then you see him karate, and then you see him playing cricket, and then flying in from overseas. He's busy all over the place. Did Air Finale surprise you with the amount of energy that he has? Is he singing the right song? Has he surprised you as a president?
Not at all. He's young. He's supposed to have energy. If you look at most of the PPP ministers, people are out. They're doing stuff, and a lot of these things are fancy words for we're doing stuff. It means people are getting service. People's lives are getting changed every day. I'm not surprised at all by President Ali, or as I would say, Irfan. I've seen him from teenage years as a youth leader amongst young people in Region 3, and he used to be associated for a period of time with a youth group that I had relations with also, and so I knew him since then, and he's had those same kinds of qualities since then. He has a flair for words. He likes some artistic poetry and so on, and he loves cricket. So this is very normal. But you mentioned seeing him in short pants at the wharf, which for me is important, and playing karate, doing karate and playing cricket. But we also saw him in Washington, and we saw him at various other places with presidents and leaders and princes, as well as business people. And we're seeing that ability to be diverse and adapt to various locations. We're seeing that reflect in how people are served.
Well, one of his qualities, I think, if it endures, and I don't see why it should endure, is the boldness and the self-confidence of going into areas which are not PPP, consists of PPP enthusiasts, and speaking to them and getting receptivity and warmness. And I think that is indication.
But you're seeing him now as president because he's on the microscope and everything he does is magnified. But go to Parfait. Parfait, if you walk through Parfait, very, very, very mixed community. And that was his doing. Like the kind of people. We worked in places like Beirut on the East Coast. It's a trademark. So I think you're seeing it now, or it's perhaps more noticeable now because he's president. And you spoke of a boldness. It comes from two things, I think. One, a genuine desire to serve everybody, but also the understanding that this label that people are trying to pin on us, that we only do this for one person and so on, this service might appear to you to be a response to what people are saying. It's not. This is just how we serve. We go to these communities. I could show you pictures now very easily of walking through Beirut with a lady, a community person named Negla Garwe. I took a boy named Donovan Sullivan to the UN with me, again from Beirut. President Ali worked really closely with communities like Den Amstel over at Region 3. But it used to be quiet work. It wasn't, oh, here we are serving this particular community. It was just service. And boldness, what appears to you to be bold is just confidence that people will accept our service.
One of the things that is inbuilt into this articulation of yours, that look, the way the opposition is behaving, you use the word, it's an advantage. And I think you do have an advantage because the AFC is dead meat. I think Mr. Norton is not serving the African Guyanese, his African Guyanese constituencies. The constant deception of African Guyanese leaders are being exposed. You can't keep for 2 years telling people about installed this. My question to you is, now that you have this strategic advantage, there is an additional burden to make sure that all the players there know their role and do not alienate people.
Absolutely.
Minister, in the next 20 years or so, do you believe we're going to
Look, wherever you have a collection of people, if it's large enough, you'll have a delinquent here or there.
Yeah, chef, of course.
The delinquent shouldn't mar everyone else.
Right,
and I think good leadership would mean that when you see that level of delinquents, or any delinquents, that it's dealt with. And I have confidence that if there's any such delinquents amongst us, that it will be dealt with. But whenever you put together a large enough number of persons, there's always going to be, different pieces of the puzzle that might not always find favor with every single person.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes more.
Yes. Minister, very quickly, in the next 20 years or so, do you believe that there's going to be a female president of Guyana? And would you say that if given the opportunity, would you serve as president of Guyana? Are you willing
So
to
we
throw
had
your
a
hat in?
female president. We had Janet Jagan. And we've seen remarkable women leaders. I think, unfortunately, it's still very new in the world. We're still seeing way too few women. I don't think we should ever appoint someone only because of gender. I do believe, however, that if you don't give particular genders the opportunity to shine, or you don't give people the opportunity to shine because of their gender and so on, then you'll be denying the population of that skill and talent. Thankfully, the party I associate with has been very, very welcoming, open to women. So although the law says you must have 1/3 on your list, it doesn't require 1/3 in parliament. We're almost always making 1/3 in parliament, and so you do see women shining. I think it's a nice, interesting new world we're living in.
You would be, if given the opportunity, to serve as president?
Leonard, that's far way off, but yeah, I think we're living in exciting times. I think you're going to see new things that could not have been imagined 40 years ago, in a variety of fields, not only the presidency,
Interesting times, ladies and gentlemen. I think
our time is.
yeah, Freddie, you want to say something quickly?
I just want
you
to
got
say
2 seconds.
I just want to say it was interesting talking to you in politics. I think you have a large political instinct, and it will serve your party well. I wish you best and good luck in the coming 2 years in your campaign for re-election.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, Freddie started with his hairstyle one way and it went the other way. And these are things that I have to live with. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. On Wednesday, we're going to have an interesting time. And again, I'm appealing to Freddie to, know that there's a host here. And that it is going to be interesting. Dr. David Hines, and he's going to be here from the WPA. It is going to be interesting, and I expect to be in the middle of it. I have to sit in the middle. Freddie on one side and David Hines on the other side. And we're going to talk politics. We're going to talk
Can I tell him what you said?
Absolutely. He hurt so many people. And continue.
It is going to be interesting. A lot of opinions is going to be there. And of course, I want to say we can't close without saying 2 things. I want to say thank you very much to Minister of Education, Priya Manickchand. And of course, as always, our guests have been very gracious, and she has been. And we have to bring her back because we have to talk about readying Guyana for the future. Where are we right now? And maybe the changes that's going to happen by 2030. Those are conversations that we have to have. We also take this opportunity, as we always do, take care on our roadways. Make sure that you protect your life, your property, and other people's property and lives as well. Stay safe until we see you on Wednesday again.